as we welcome in Colin Patterson. We've been talking about him all show. He's here, Stanley Cup champion. My brother, the Cowboy, was texting me last night. He's so jealous, Patter, that I was at the Chucks. And he goes, how's the crowd? I said, sold out. Like everything to do with chuck wagons around here.
Absolutely.
They go, you guys go nuts over chuck wagons and rodeo in this town.
Oh, it's a great sport, great people. I mean, and that's their life. You know, that's their life. They love horses, they love the animals, and they love racing around the track. What could be better?
What a great life. They sit there, they have this circuit. I mean, I loosely knew about it, but all summer they do this. Yeah. Man, what a great way to spend the summer.
Oh, it's great. And I think the people that are into it really enjoy it. You know, Curtis Glencross was into it for a while and
competing.
Yeah. Well, he was an outrider.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. So
fearless,
I mean,
SOB.
Fearless, you know, and that's the way he played the game. And but it is so much fun. You get back into the barns if you're fortunate enough to get back there, and you realize it's families. You know, there's a lot of families that have been involved for a lot of years, and their love of animals, their love of the horses, and you know they love to compete too.
It's a good vibe. Yeah, all of it.
And the horses want to compete too. That's the big thing. They're athletes.
As I say, you can get tickets. It runs through the weekend. The banner's right behind Colin's head there. Showpass.com. There you go.
Big head to be behind.
Yeah, right. So
hey, blocked it out.
The big topic, what a perfect day for you to come down, because Auston Matthews signs a 4-year extension. We covered a lot of football in hour one. We're going to talk hockey now with the Stanley Cup champion, Flames and Sabres alum. Kind of caught me off guard a little bit. We've been hearing about it all summer. Would he or wouldn't he? And he did. Richest player in the NHL in terms of per season wage. What do you think?
Well, I think, it's obviously a good move for Toronto. Keep Auston there. I mean, he's a star player. Probably he and McDavid are two of the best. And when you're in Toronto, you're considered the best by the fans of the Leafs, and it's a huge following in Leaf Nation. So I think it's a really good move. I think it's a good move for Brad Treliving and the Toronto Maple Leafs, and a great first really big signing for him and moving on.
Well, how do you mean moving on?
Well, moving on from Calgary and getting into Toronto. And
for Brad, yeah.
For Brad,
I thought you meant Matthews.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
For Auston Matthews, because there's lots of rumors around. There are always rumors about everything. Maybe he'll go to Phoenix after this contract. But, you add 4 more years to it. I mean, it's very impressive for him. And I think for the Leaf organization, it gives them some stability there, too, as well.
Well, there's a lot we can talk about with this, and I appreciate you coming down. You're a busy guy, by the way. We tried to line this up last week. You're the busiest guy in town. These people at Century Downs were like, what does Colin do? I'm like, I don't really know. It's just really busy.
He's out and around.
He's out and around every single day with the Flames alumni. But to the tree living thing, and it's in my commentary today at rodpeterson.com. It's there right now. I said, what does this say that Brad Treliving could sign the most lucrative contract in NHL history in terms of per season? It's a big deal, man. If he'd lost Auston Matthews, he wouldn't be able to show up for work.
Oh, no.
It's a big deal for Brad.
Wouldn't be able to show up in Ontario.
Yeah.
Let alone work.
Yeah, right. But here in Calgary, you hear it, man. You talk to more people than I do. People still think he's to blame for anything that's wrong with the Flames. Brad's to blame. And I'm like, what? No. You better be careful who you run out of town.
Yeah. Because
he was kind of run out of town.
Oh, I know. But I go, that's the business, right? And people are looking at the business going, hey, today, where, the hockey business, you got to grow your team, you got to, invest in your youth and your draft choices, and then the players that you have, you got to figure out how to sign them.
Yeah.
And so now that they got Auston Matthews signed, that's a big piece of the puzzle for Toronto.
Yeah, well, I got to say this, and we're on Colin's cable. Tell us. He says he watches the show. So you would get me when I say this. Our channel is anchored out of Toronto, Game Plus, okay? I'm not sure. What's the market, guys? Tell me the area. It's not far from Scotiabank Arena. We have a big Toronto viewership. I'm getting to a point.
Yeah, I can't wait for that point, actually.
Land the plane. There's a huge Toronto influence here in the hockey community. You're from there. And then all these Flames alum that played for the Leafs, Lanny, Jamie McCown, there's a lot of guys, right? You all have opinions on the Leafs.
Oh, we do, and some vary. Some,
Yeah.
For me, I'm more on the side that, until Brad Treliving got there, maybe, you don't want them to win. But, yeah, success, because when Toronto has success, then they're the greatest team that ever played. When they don't, they're still the greatest team. So it's sort of, a double-edged sword in a way. But what I really enjoy is when, you talk to Lanny and Jamie McCowan, because they played for the Leafs, they're pro-Leafs. Pro. Like for me, I go,
yes, there's
so much publicity around the Leafs, on TV, on radio, on the podcast, on everything. If you were somebody looking into Canada, you go, well, they only have one team.
Yep.
It's Toronto Maple Leafs, where, there's other great teams out there and great players.
But that's why I get a kick out of this, because I get so many people saying to me, why is your show popular? You don't talk about the Leafs. I'm like, that's why it's popular. We're the only ones not talking about the Leafs.
And what are we talking about now?
The Leafs. Yeah, but it's Austin Matthews' sign. But one of my favorite stories, you'll get a kick out of this, and I'll never forget it. I went to 30 Panthers regular season games and then almost every playoff game, rounds 2, 3, and 4 in Florida. And the ushers there, I get to know these guys. I'm like you. I talk to everybody. You've seen it now. So they come up to me and they say, so these Toronto fans, in that Boston accent, but they live in Florida. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
They're like, these Toronto fans, do we got to worry about them? And I go, what do you mean? Well, we tossed 37 Bruins fans out of here last round. We don't want to be doing that again. And I said, Leafs fans, they're just annoying. They're not dangerous.
No, not dangerous at all.
Not dangerous at all. Harmless. But the thing was, when the gates we were waiting to open an hour and a half before the game, they're the first ones there, beating on the door. And, of course, they lost. So these guys were sitting in their seats crying. Grown men crying, Patter. Leaf fans.
I see it every year. I see it every year in Toronto.
Right. So I guess our poll question today, I'll take you a swing of that and we'll talk about some other things. The poll question for Key Auto Group today, by the way, at the Key Auto Group, you can buy with confidence, knowing that they provide reports on all vehicles they sell. Get fully informed about your next vehicle by going to keyautogroup.ca. The poll question is, will the Toronto Maple Leafs win a Stanley Cup, hold your laughter, during the term of the Austin Matthews contract? What are they saying on YouTube, Clark? What are they saying? Because on Twitter, I can tell you, where is it? Oh, we never tweeted it. 77% saying no, they will not. Can you get it to Twitter, guys? Yes or no, Colin Patterson?
I would say no, but you never know. I mean, the one thing about it is if they can get a goalie who gets hot at the right time in the playoffs, but obviously they have to get to the playoffs first. And every year you think, oh, we can make the playoffs, we make the playoffs. But when you start thinking like that, then sometimes you don't. But so that's their first focus is let's get to the playoffs. And then, if you get a hot goalie and they've got some great players, they probably have to shore up the defense a little bit. And I'm sure they're looking at that. They've got an interesting defense right now. I think there's a couple of, getting long of tooth, and then you've got some real young guys that, need the stability. So I would say no, though. If you're going to ask me to lay down,
history's your best predictor.
Yeah,
history would tell you no, they won't.
Yeah.
But
they, eventually they have to win. At some point you have to win. Well, you would think.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, though, because how many years you play in the NHL?
Just 10.
5-5 Calgary Buffalo? Or?
No, 8-2.
8-2?
Yeah.
Okay. How long, if at all, will the playing guilty thing factor that they got their GM fired, if they like Kyle Dubas? Will that be a factor for the Leafs players?
I don't think it will be.
No?
No. I truly don't. I think, they're going to have to play because it's Toronto. There's no guilt factor. Maybe in other teams there might be a guilt factor, but not for that organization. You're in Toronto. There's heavy media coverage. Everybody's on you. They're watching what you do every day, and so you have to play hard every day if you want to play there.
You don't mind talking about the Leafs, do you?
No.
Yeah, me either, because we don't normally do it. And my point is, because you won a Stanley Cup, you bring a perspective that a lot of guys don't. And my point is the Leafs have taken some real kicks in the pills, man, since Matthews got there in terms of playoff losses. You guys did too before you won in 89.
Yeah.
Do you see a parallel there?
I don't see the same parallel, but because they've had a good team for a long time, like on paper, and in the regular season they play really well. It's getting those players that play a playoff style where you can really grind it out but still produce. And if you look at teams that win, that's what they do. It's not by any fluke. You can have the most talented team, but if you don't know how to play playoff hockey, and if you don't go far in the playoffs, you don't truly understand it. And, until we, in '86, we went to the final, we lost in Montreal, or against Montreal, and, we realized from that what you have to do. And it took us 3 more years to get back.
I get what you're saying. It's 11:11 Mountain, by the way, 1:11 Eastern. I don't know if you're into numerology or not, but are you? Visualize a positive outcome.
Beautiful.
You're saying they haven't gone far enough to experience enough pain, is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, in Toronto, they got into the second round this year for the first time in, 9 years.
Yeah.
And, you would have thought they won the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
And so you have to, you got to figure out, how do we get to the third round? How do we get to the Stanley Cup final? And how do you build your team to do that? And you got to build your team to not only win a cup, but to get out of your division and your conference. Right? It's not just building it to say, hey, we're going to win. You got to figure out how you're going to beat, teams within your division and then teams within your conference. Because the conferences play a little different style, divisions play a little different style too.
Yeah, and my mind's racing as you say this. I kind of think that Kyle Dubas built a team like a fantasy team. There wasn't that grit there. And what did Brad do? I think Tyler Bertuzzi's that type of guy. Ryan Reeves can't hurt. He's trying to make him a little grittier.
Yeah, and I think that will help in the long run. It might not show off in the regular season, but I think come playoff time, you need those guys. And those guys need to step up too. But you can't just have them and not play them during the regular season. You got to give them, give them a little work in the regular season or a lot of work, and then that will carry over in the playoffs, because you just can't expect a guy to jump in who might be a gritty player and turn it on and win you a cup. That just doesn't happen. You've got to build that. You've got to get the right chemistry on the right lines, and that's the big part of the game. And as I mentioned, their defense, they got to be big, and then goaltending is key. There isn't a team that's won a cup in a long time that had a below average goalie. Every goalie either, they might be average during the season, but they get hot. And that's what happened this year when you look at Vegas. Their goalie got hot at the right time, and he became, the best goalie.
I hope you're loving this chat as much as me. I wonder how you are on local players, because in Toronto, Ryan O'Reilly left first chance he had. He signed in Nashville. Luke Shen, who's from Saskatoon, left. He signed in Nashville. They both went to Nashville. But they do have Johnny T, Tavares, and Mitch Marner. So it would mean a lot to them to be Leafs and win there. And you're from Toronto, and look at the 89 Flames. Vernie, Tim Hunter. There were a few.
Yeah.
That means a lot.
It means a lot to win in your hometown, obviously, and play for your hometown team.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of guys that, grew up in Ontario that would love to play for the Leafs. And when you do, I would imagine it's quite an honor. So, for those guys, that would be huge for them to win. It's been 50-some years, I think. I'm not sure of the exact count now. But I know I was a young man when they last won.
For the Leafs since 67?
Yeah.
Since 67.
Yeah.
It's getting up
been
there,
a long
man.
time. Been a long time.
56 years.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm sorry. Kevin Cheveldayoff knows a heck of a lot more about this than me, but I look at the Winnipeg Jets, and they had opportunities to draft not even just Winnipeg kids, but Western Canadian kids, and they didn't. They went with Americans or Eastern kids. And I'm biased. If you don't call me whatever you want. But I just think that local player means a lot.
I think it means a lot. I think local player means a lot. I think if there's an offspring of a player that, played in your organization, to get them in your organization means a lot too. And so I think, when you factor in a lot of things, that's if you're choosing and you're going, geez, I don't know who to take here in this draft choice, I would go with, a local kid, as you mentioned, or somebody who's, a son of somebody who's played in the organization.
Mm-hmm. But that's just me. The Stanley Cup champion with the Flames, and he had some good Toronto Leaf fan stories. But before we do that, I promised these guys we would answer their questions. Your Flames Mount Rushmore will remind you there are only 4 spots. You can't get your chisel out and make 5. I feel like this is harder than you thought it was going to be.
It is way harder, and you know what? I was getting my chisel out. I was going to make like a bunch. I was going to make 10. But, you know, I would say, obviously, the number one would be Lanny. You know, Lanny is an iconic and great guy, and he's the guy who really, you know, brought the Flames to the forefront. And, you know, not only in playing, but in the community spirit and charitable stuff. I always say we're all disciples of Lanny.
Yep.
You know,
he's the soul of the franchise.
He is. And then, you know, I go Verney, Mike Vernon, former roommate, by the way. But we can't talk about those stories on the air.
Sure.
But, you know, I mean, Verney was unbelievable, you know, from Calgary, we mentioned earlier. Won, you know, 2 Stanley Cups, one with Calgary, one with Detroit, was, you know, MVP, and could have been, you know, 2-time MVP. You got to look at, Theo.
Now you're at 3.
You know, I'm 3, and it's a really tough because we've had so many great players. You know, and I you know, you got to look at Iggy. Although, you know, Iggy had such a long, great career, was a fabulous player. Might not have won a cup, but truly did. You know, if we would have instant replay, but we didn't at the time. So those would be my 4. I mean, you know, standing and getting chiseled right now, you know, would be an Al McInnes and probably a Mark Giordano. You know, Gio played here a long, long time, undrafted. You know, so I look at him and I go, you know, he deserves some honorable mention. There's lots of guys we could mention, but those guys, in my mind, you know, played a long time in Calgary and stood the test of time.
Thank you for being today's person that brought up the 2004 Stanley Cup final, because I joke with people not from here that it comes up every single day.
It does. Yeah. it truly does.
At least you have that ring on your finger, which you're wearing today, unlike the other guys from 04. Man, that's a lot to live with.
Oh, man, you know, and it's tough because, you know, for some of the guys, they only got there the one time. And it's really tough. And, you know, it's unfortunate, but that's the way the game was at the time.
Well, I tell you something. Bill Lindsay has become a really good friend of mine in South Florida, and he lost in '96, swept. This year he's doing radio there now. Didn't happen. Like, he needs counseling, I think, because it's a tough. Get to 2 Stanley Cup finals and lose.
Yeah,
I know if you know guys that have had that, man.
Oh yeah, and it is tough, and you know, you work so hard to get there, and you think this is your year, and you know, as we talked about earlier, you need everything coming together. You need a hot goalie, you know, and you need the timing to be right. I think the 9-day layoff. We're not going to go back too far, but the 9-day layoff that they had really hurt them. You know, because they were a hot team. They didn't know why they were playing that well, but they were. It was just clicking for them. Everything was clicking, and then all of a sudden, you get 9 days off, and, you know, maybe your goalie isn't as hot. He loses that rhythm. Your team
injuries start to swell up.
Yeah, and you lose that whole rhythm.
That's exactly what happened. But they can make another kick at it, another run at it. So that great question from John in Winnipeg, I'm interested to get your answer. He said, if Las Vegas can win a Stanley Cup, why can't Toronto? You're the Cup champ in the house, so you take a swing at it, because I have a theory, but you go ahead.
Yeah, I think that, you know, to me, every team in the league should be looking at Vegas and go, well, how did they do it? And people go, well, they were given so many great players. Well, no, those guys, you know, they were great players when they got to Vegas and played as a team and, you know, got an opportunity to play. Before, you probably hadn't heard of, you know, 70 or 80% of them. You know, probably the one star would have been Jonathan Marchessault that, you know, Florida didn't want. They didn't want to pay, you know, what he was probably wanting, and that's why they let him go.
There's a lot of those guys,
but all those guys could have been protected by the team. That's what people tend to forget. Yeah, did they start off with a pretty good team? Yeah, they did, but they, you know, so they should. You know, they're paying that much money for a franchise. You can't start them off losing because you want to get fans in the building. But it wasn't like they were all first-line players. The majority of them were third, fourth-line guys that needed a chance to step up, and they end up with probably 4 second-line players, you know, that got hot at the right time. They had 5 goalies that first year, much like they did this year, right? So, you know, obviously goaltending is huge in the game, as we've talked about, and you need that depth in goaltending, because if the first guy, you know, gets hurt, or second guy gets hurt, or not playing well, you need to, you know, keep going, especially in the playoffs. You don't have time to say, oh, we're going to develop this player. You need guys that can step in and play.
Well, you mentioned a few, but Riley Smith, Derek Englund, Nosek. who were these guys? And the expansion rules are that have always been that you can only protect one goalie. So Pittsburgh had two great ones.
Yeah.
So you're going to get a good goalie. And so, yeah. But my take on that is simply culture, to be honest with you. Vegas from day one have had the same people. I'm just, with franchises and probably businesses too, but I've never worked outside sports per se. Those roots in some teams are so long and rotten, they need to be just cut right off. Vegas, do you know what I mean? You say, how does Vegas win in year 6? Well, it's the same people.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And they've got a pretty good culture of winning. That's my take on that.
Yeah, and I think, you get a culture of outside the game, but you get a culture of winning within the game too, and the team. And that's the bigger part of it. And they've got to find players to come up, and you can't just keep signing free agents all the time, although, it did work in Vegas's situation, but you got to be able to match that free agent up with the team that you have and the culture that you have. You can't bring somebody else in that doesn't fit into your culture or your team. You need to get rid of those guys pretty quick.
Yeah, well, that's what the fans don't understand. And to be honest, they fired 3 coaches. Well, 2 coaches. They've had 3 coaches in Vegas in 6 years. It shouldn't work out the way that it did based on that, right? But it has. So,
it has. And you know what I mean? And sometimes matching the coach up with the team you have, too, is important. Because, not every team can play the way that, one coach wants. So when you bring in a coach that can play, the style and fits in and can connect with the players that your team already has, that's when you can produce a championship, too.
John wants to know if you have any funny Doug Gilmour stories you can share.
Well, I've got lots of funny Doug Gilmour stories, but none that I'm going to share on the air. But
I think you can tell the story about that party. And if you don't want to, don't. But Peter Marr's party with Terry Crisp.
Yeah, so...
This is a good one, guys.
I can't remember what number.
2,500.
2,500 for Peter Marr announcing on the air. We were in Buffalo, and they announced the game. Peter announced the game, and he's got his family and friends there, and their big celebration afterwards. So we end up in a double room back at the hotel, and the party's going on, and everybody's having a few drinks, and it's getting later in the night, and obviously security comes down and says, can you keep it down? Absolutely, we will. And it continues, and it gets louder and louder and louder. Finally, they call Crispy, Terry Crisp. And so Crispy now comes down, knocks on the door. Somebody looks in, and he goes, it's Crispy. So
the head coach.
One door opens, another one opens on the other end, and I grab my roommate, Mike Vernon, and we get out of there pretty quick. And Crispy comes in. The first guy he sees is, Rick Natras. The second guy he sees is Theo. And so now he's just all over those guys. And I'm sure he probably caught, a few other guys, but we were out there.
You snuck out the back door.
The back door. Literally, he opened the one door. As soon as I said it was Crispy, there was guys piling to the back door. I was first. I grabbed Vernie. We're out at the door. And then we're across over to our room. And, and then we're watching through the people to see what's going on. And you can see Crispy's finger going like this. Like, oh, thank goodness I'm not there on that one.
Do you think, and Terry Crisp just retiring as the color or analyst in Nashville, I guess he was the panelist.
Yeah.
I look at these coaches, Mike Babcock in Columbus, not a lot's expected out of Columbus this year, not by me anyways, John Tortorella in Philadelphia. Do you think Terry Crisp would have success as a coach? Not today if he was to stand behind a bench, but his ways from the 80s could coach now?
Well, I think, like everybody, you have to adapt. You have to change your ways because stuff that worked in the 80s doesn't work today. Part of it does, but you have to be selective on what part you're using. Yelling and, pointing fingers doesn't work today where it did back in the day. But, being good with the media and being good with your players, that works today. Protecting your players in the media works today in a big way because the media is, everybody's looking for their story, right? And everybody they don't want to bring the positive out in players, it seems. They want to hit on the negatives. So, as a coach, you got to be able to deflect that. If your guy's not having a great game, well, you know what? That's all right. He's had great games in the past. And that's where Badger Bob was really good, Like, he'd talk about the positive, always positive, 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 which, that's a lot of what the game is today, too.
Ryan Huska seems to have that. and you've known him since he was 8. We won't get into that story again, but he seems to have his finger on that.
Yeah, and I think that's really good because, Ryan has seen, good coaches and bad coaches, head coaches that he had, and I mean, you sort of pick the best out of what you've learned over the years, and I think he's going to do that. He's got a great rapport with the players. He's been in the organization some 6 years plus, so he knows all the players. He knows, what style they can play. He knows what to expect of guys, and he knows how to treat the players too in the way that's going to give positive results. Not that guys don't play hard for every coach, but sometimes they play harder for, people they like too.
Yep.
And that just happens in life, and you're in business. If you got a boss that's not making it fun to go to the work, you don't really want to go to work. But you go into work where a boss is making it fun and it's enjoyable. And believe me, the game is the game, and it's got to be fun. You got to work hard. You got to do everything else. You got to win. It's but it's got to be fun. And if you're going into work and you're having fun, you're doing the little extras. Boss asks you, stay for an extra half hour. Yeah, sure, I'll do that.
And your productivity will go up.
Yeah, and your productivity goes up, and you want to help. You want to be part of it, and that's being part of that culture. So I think the Flames will have a bit of a new culture, with not only Ryan but with Craig Conroy too at the helm.
Okay, so I won't ask you to take off your hat and show us, maybe your sunglasses and show us. You're wearing the Breaking Free Foundation hat, right? Yes. Oh yeah, it's got black. Yeah, you can see it on there. Yeah, that is, you're a board member. That perfect, right? Hey, thanks.
Oh, yeah.
Breaking Free Foundation. Tell us. Well, I know what it is. Tell our viewers what it is and listeners and why it's so important to you, and maybe how they can help.
Yeah, and so we help people deal with trauma, and trauma can be in any form. There's lots of different trauma, whether it's a death in the family, whether it's abuse, mental, physical, sexual. There's so many different forms of trauma, drug abuse, alcohol abuse.
Car accident.
It could be anything. And so we help people deal with that. And what we do is we give out grants, $750 grants, and we match people up with the proper help that they need, whether it's a psychologist, psychiatrist, a person who can help them. We match those people up, and we have about 280 people on our waiting list right now. There's 4 members of our board, and we don't have any paid staff. We have one person who looks after sort of the accounting side of it, and that's basically it. We have to pay some legal fees to keep our everything in check on paper side, but it's a great organization, and I truly got involved because of Theo. And it was Theo and Amber Craig who started the Breaking Free Foundation, and I sat beside Theo for 2 years in the dressing room when he first came in the league, and I never realized what he had gone through. And once his book came out, and you were able to hear and see about what had happened to him, I said, I've got to help him in some way. And so that's how I became part of the Breaking Free Foundation. And so we try to raise money. We do a golf tournament. We'll probably talk about in a sec. And then we're going to look at doing a poker tournament and maybe some other things to raise money. We do a wood sale. And we're very small time. We're raising, $5,000, $10,000 at a time. Although our golf tournament did really well this year, we're probably going to be, they announced $35,000. I think we're going to be up to $40,000 by the time it ends, which is great for us. So that allows us to put a lot more people through and take our list down from the 280 that we have.
18 people it's grown in the last week.
Yeah.
Since last I heard.
And the thing is...
I shouldn't be laughing. That's not funny.
No, but the more people hear about it, the more awareness is out there, the more people want to participate. But we also do... peer-to-peer sessions too. We do that once a month live, and now we, because through COVID we started doing it online, and that's growing too. And so, people hearing about it, participating in it, being part of it, and we've helped a lot of people. And for me, I go, if we can help one person, it's worth the effort. And we've helped a lot of people, and that's where Theo's brilliant in that. When he's dealing with people who've had trauma, and he's so good at that. And that's what's great to see.
Well, I would say to our viewers and listeners, wherever you may be, you can go look it up on Twitter, Instagram, at Breaking Free Foundation. For instance,
.ca.
The website, but even the accounts on social media, they have Zoom group sessions where you can sit and talk about your trauma, which incidentally, the definition of trauma is any circumstance or set of circumstances that your brain cannot comprehend. So that encompasses all the things that you talked about. And a lot of times you just need to talk about it. So, yeah, we're out of time. Sorry. Anything else, Patter, before we let you go on any of these things?
Well, you know what? I just want to thank you, Rod.
Yeah.
Rod came in, was our MC for the day, and did a fabulous job because, replacing the two idiots who did it before, Theo and I.
You guys, you're great auctioneers.
Yeah, really good auctioneers.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for having me, man. It was so great. Come out of there with a lot more friends, and we'll see you when we're back through Calgary.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks,
Stanley
Rod.
Cup champion and board member of Breaking Free Foundation, Colin Patterson.